Hello and welcome to Algebra 1, Lesson 30. In this video, we're going to learn about multiplying polynomials. So before we jump in and start talking about multiplying polynomials, I want everybody to recall the distributive property. So if I have something like 6 times the quantity 4 minus 6, remember, I can remove the parentheses here and write this as 6 times 4 minus 6 times 6. So 6 times 4 is 24, minus 6 times 6, which is 36. And this gives me a result of negative 12. And I can see that by just working inside the parentheses first. If I had done 4 minus 6, that would give me negative 2. And then I would have 6 times negative 2, which would also give me negative 12. As another example, if I have negative 7 times the quantity 5 plus 1, again, I can remove the parentheses by multiplying negative 7 times 5. Negative 7 times 5 plus negative 7 times 1. Negative 7 times 1. So negative 7 times 5 is negative 35 plus negative 7 times 1, that's negative 7. And this gives me negative 42. Again, I could have found the same thing by just saying, okay, 5 plus 1 is 6. Negative 7 times 6 is negative 42. So at this point, we should be very familiar with the distributive property since we've been using it all throughout Algebra 1 and most of pre-algebra. So now we're going to use the same technique to multiply a monomial, right? That's a polynomial that has just one single term, times a binomial, right? This is a polynomial with two terms. So we're going to have 4x times the quantity 3x minus 4. So how are we going to do this? We're going to use the distributive property. Remember, I'm going to take this guy out here, and I'm going to multiply it by each term inside the parentheses. So 4x times 3x. And then I have that minus there. And then we have 4x times 4. So for something like 4x times 3x, how do we do that? Well, you'd multiply the number parts together, the coefficients, right? What is 4 times 3? Well, that's going to be 12. Then you'd multiply the variables together. So I have x times x. So I know from my rules of exponents that if I'm multiplying and I have the same base, I would just add the exponents, right? I keep the base the same, add the exponents. So this has an exponent of 1, and so does this. So x times x is x raised to the second power, or x squared, right? Keep the base the same, so x stays the same, and then add 1 plus 1, that's 2. All right, then we're subtracting away. Now we have 4x times 4. So 4 times 4 is 16, and then x just comes along for the ride, so that's 16x. So we end up with 12x squared minus 16x. And when you're working with polynomials, you always want to make sure that you don't have any more like terms that you can combine. I have an x squared here, and I have an x here. Those are not like terms, so this is the best that we can do. 12x squared minus 16x. All right, for the next one, I have 5x times the quantity 5x plus 1. And again, I'm just going to use my distributive property. So 5x times 5x, 5x times 5x, and then plus. Next, I'm going to have 5x times 1. 5x times 1. So 5x times 5x, 5 times 5 is 25. And then x times x, again, is x squared. And then plus 5x times 1 is 5x. So these two are not like terms, right? You have x squared and you have x. So that's going to be our answer, 25x squared plus 5x. What about something like 3p times the quantity 4p plus 2? Again, I'm going to use my distributive property. So 3p times 4p, 3p times 4p, plus, right, this guy's going to go over there, 3p times 2, 3p times 2. So 3p times 4p, you do 3 times 4, that's 12, and then p times p is p squared. Then plus, next we have 3p times 2, 2 times 3 is 6, and then p just comes along for the ride, so that's 6p. So I end up with 12p squared plus 6p as my answer. All right, now I'm going to make it a little bit more tedious. We have a monomial that's being multiplied by a trinomial. And a trinomial is just a polynomial with 3 terms. You have 1, 2, 3 terms. Same principle here. I'm going to take this guy right here, multiply by each term inside the parentheses. So we have negative 8n times this quantity, negative 6n squared plus 10n minus 13. And I'm just going to say, okay, negative 8n times negative 6n squared. So negative 8n times negative 6n squared. Then plus, I'll have negative 8n times 10n. So negative 8n times 10n. And then minus, I have negative 8n times 13. And one of the things you can do here, you can think about this as negative 13, right? So you don't make a sign mistake. Or you can have a minus, so you'd end up with minus and negative. We know that would be plus a positive. But just to make this easy on us, I'm just going to put plus right here. And I'm going to write this as a negative 13. Okay, so let's go through and crank out the multiplication. So negative 8n times negative 6n squared. Negative 8 times negative 6 is, first off, a positive, right? Negative times negative is positive. 8 times 6 is 48. And then if we have n times n squared, well, the base n stays the same. And then we just add the exponents. Remember, this has an exponent of 1. So 1 plus 2 would give me 3. So this is 48n cubed. Then next I have negative 8n times 10n. Well, negative 8 times 10 is negative 80, so minus 80. And then n times n is n squared. Again, keep the base n the same, and you add your exponents, right? Each case has an exponent of 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, so you get n squared. Okay, then we have negative 8n times negative 13. So negative times negative is positive, and 8 times 13 is 104. So this would be 104, and then don't forget the n. So there's your answer. You get 48n cubed minus 80n squared plus 104n. All right, so now that we've seen how to multiply a monomial, which again is a polynomial with one single term, times a polynomial, and the specific examples we looked at multiplying by a binomial, which is a polynomial with two terms, and a trinomial, which is a polynomial with three terms. But that really doesn't matter, because if I had a polynomial with 4 terms or 5 terms or whatever, it would be the same process. I would take the monomial and I would multiply it by each term in that polynomial. Okay, that's all we need to do. We're using our distributive property. Now, when we multiply two polynomials, and neither is a monomial, okay, neither one is a monomial, we multiply each term of the first polynomial, by each term of the second polynomial. So let me show you that. So let's say we have something like negative 4x minus 4, and we're multiplying this by 6x plus 8. So this is the product of two binomials. And this is going to happen so often, we have like a little shortcut for this called FOIL. And I'm going to teach you that in the next lesson. But for right now, I'm going to kind of show you a general method to do this. So I'm just going to take each term of the first polynomial and multiply it by each term of the second polynomial. So I'm going to break this up into two different problems. So I'm going to have negative 4x multiplied by this 6x plus 8. So I'll have negative 4x multiplied by 6x plus 8. And then I'm going to add to that, I'm going to take negative 4, and I'm going to multiply it again by 6x plus 8. So this is each term of the first polynomial being multiplied by each term of the second polynomial. So again, now I'm just going to use my distributive property, just like I used in the previous example. So for the first one, I would do negative 4x times 6x. So I'd have negative 4 times 6, that's negative 24. And then x times x is x squared. Then I'd have negative 4x times 8. So I know negative times positive is negative, so I'm going to put a minus there. 4 times 8 is 32. And then x will come along for the ride. So the result from this is negative 24x squared minus 32x. All right, now next we're looking over here. I have plus and then negative 4 times 6x. So negative times positive is negative. 4 times 6 is 24. So I'd have 24, and then x comes along for the ride, so minus 24x. And then I have negative 4 times 8. So negative times positive is negative. 4 times 8 is 32. So I'm not done. In the previous examples, I never had any like terms or anything. I would not report this as my answer because I have negative 32x and I have negative 24x. Those can be combined, right? They're like terms. So what is negative 32 minus 24? Well, that's negative 56. So this is going to end up being negative 24x squared minus 56x minus 32. That would be my answer. All right, let's take a look at another one. We have 8x plus 8 times 7x plus 4. So again, I'm going to take each term of the first polynomial and multiply it by each term of the second polynomial. So I'm going to do 8x times 7x plus 4. So 8x times 7x plus 4. And then plus, next I'm going to do 8 times, again, 7x plus 4. All right, so I'm going to do 8x times 7x. 8 times 7 is 56. X times x is x squared. Then next I'd have 8x times 4. 8 times 4 is 32. So I'm going to put plus 32. And then x comes along for the ride. So plus 32x. All right, then next I have 8 times 7x. 8 times 7 is 56. And then x would come along for the ride. So this is plus 56x. And lastly, I have 8 times 4. And that's 32. So plus 32. And again, I have like terms that I can combine here. So I have to do 56x squared plus 32x plus 56x is 88x. And then plus 32. So that's my answer. 56x squared plus 88x plus 32. All right, for the next one, I have a binomial multiplied by a trinomial. So nothing's going to change here. I'm still going to multiply each term of the first polynomial by each term of the second polynomial. So I have negative b minus 12 times 8b squared minus 9b minus 5. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guy right here, negative b, and I'm going to multiply it by this whole thing here. So negative b times, inside of parentheses, 8b squared minus 9b minus 5. And then I'm going to put plus. Next, I have this negative 12, okay, negative 12 times this whole quantity. So negative 12 outside of the parentheses, and then inside of parentheses, we'll have 8b squared minus 9b minus 5. Let's go ahead and crank this out. So I'll have negative b times 8b squared. Negative times positive is negative, and then you basically have b times b squared, that's b cubed. So you would have 8, that comes along for the ride, and then b cubed. All right, so negative 8b cubed, and then the next one, we'd have a negative b times a negative 9b. So negative times negative is positive. B times b is b squared. So this would be positive 9b squared. Then I'd have negative b times negative 5. So negative times negative is positive. You have b times 5, that's just 5b. Okay. Now moving on to this over here, I'll have negative 12 times 8b squared. Negative times positive is negative. 12 times 8 is 96. So this would be minus 96b squared. Then next I have negative 12 times negative 9b. Negative times negative is positive. 12 times 9 is 108. So this would be 108b. Then lastly, I have negative 12 times negative 5. Negative times negative is positive. 12 times 5 is 60. So we have negative 8b cubed plus 9b squared plus 5b minus 96b squared plus 108b plus 60. So where are my like terms here? Nothing to combine with this one, but I have 9b squared and I have negative 96b squared. Those are like terms. And then I have 5b and I have 108b. Those are like terms. So we want to simplify by combining like terms here before we report our answer. So negative 8b cubed, that's going to stay the same. And then 9b squared minus 96b squared, that's going to be negative 87b squared. And then I have 5b plus 108b, that's going to be plus 113b. And then finally plus 60. So there's your answer. Negative 8b cubed minus 87b squared plus 113b plus 60. All right, for the next one, I have negative 11v minus 1. And we're multiplying this by negative 7v squared minus 8v plus 4. So again, I'm going to take each term of the first polynomial and multiply by each and every term of the second polynomial. So I'm going to take this negative 11v, multiply it by this guy. So negative 11v times, you have negative 7v squared minus 8v plus 4. And then plus, next I'm going to take negative 1 and multiply it by this guy as well. So plus negative 1 times negative 7v squared minus 8v plus 4. So negative 11v times negative 7v squared. Negative 11 times negative 7 is 77. V times v squared is v cubed. Negative 11v times negative 8v. Negative times negative is positive. 11 times 8 is 88. V times v is v squared. Negative 11v times 4 would be negative. And then 11 times 4 is 44. And then v. All right, then moving on over here, I have negative 1 times negative 7v squared. It's basically just a sign change, right? You multiply by negative 1, you're just changing the sign. So this would be plus 7v squared. Negative 1 times negative 8v, that would be plus 8v. Again, just changing the sign. Negative 1 times 4 would be minus 4. Again, lastly, just changing the sign. All right, so now let's look for like terms. So 77v cubed, nothing I can combine with that. 88v squared and 7v squared, those are like terms. These are like terms. So what is 88 plus 7? Well, that's 95. So then plus 95v squared. And then for other like terms, we have negative 44v and 8v. Those are like terms. So if we can combine those, you'd end up with negative 36v. So minus 36v. And then lastly, minus 4. So we end up with 77v cubed plus 95v squared minus 36v minus 4. All right, let's take a look at the next one. So now we have a trinomial times another trinomial. So this isn't getting more difficult. It's just becoming more and more tedious, right? As you expand these things out and get, polynomials with more and more terms, this just becomes more tedious and harder to keep track of, kind of where everything is. All right, so again, I'm just going to multiply every term of the first polynomial by every term of the second polynomial. That's all I'm doing. So I'm going to take 4x squared, and I'm going to multiply it by this polynomial here, 6x squared plus 6x minus 6. So without going through and kind of creating all this, kind of extra work, let's just do it and write our answer here. So 4x squared times 6x squared. 4 times 6 is 24. X squared times x squared is x to the 4th power, right? X is the base. That's common, so that stays the same. You add your exponents. 2 plus 2 is 4. Next, I'd have 4x squared times 6x. So 4 times 6 is 24, so plus 24. X squared times x, remember this is x to the 1st power. So x squared times x is x cubed. Then next I have 4x squared times negative 6. So that's going to be minus, and then 4 times 6 is 24, and then x squared. All right, so we're done with that one. Now we're going to do 5x times this guy. So 5x times 6x squared is going to be what? 5 times 6 is 30. So plus 30. X times x squared is x cubed. Then 5x times 6x is 30x squared. So plus 30x squared. And 5x times negative 6 would be minus 30x. All right, lastly, I'm going to do 2 times this polynomial. So 2 times 6x squared is 12x squared. So plus 12x squared. 2 times 6x is plus 12x. And then 2 times negative 6 is minus 12. So again, it starts to become just more and more tedious, right? It's not necessarily harder. It's just now I got a lot of stuff that I got to keep track of. So 24x to the 4th power, nothing I can combine with that. I'm just going to rewrite that here. 24x to the 4th power. Then I have some like terms here. So I have 24x cubed and 30x cubed. Nothing else to combine with that. So 24 plus 30 is 54. So this would be plus 54x cubed. And then next I have negative 24x squared, I have 30x squared, and I have 12x squared. So these are all like terms. These are all like terms. So what is negative 24 plus 12? Well, I know that's negative 12. And then if I had negative 12 and I add 30, that's going to give me positive 18. So this would be plus 18x squared. Now, I've used all of these. So now I just have, let me mark this in a different color, negative 30x and 12x as like terms. So negative 30x plus 12x is negative 18x. And then lastly, I have minus 12. Nothing to combine with that. So as my answer here, I get 24x to the 4th power plus 54x cubed plus 18x squared minus 18x minus 12. So what happens when we want to multiply 3 or more polynomials? Well, it's just like when you're multiplying 3 numbers. If I have something like 3 times 5 times 2, I can multiply in any order, as long as I multiply everything together. So in other words, I can do 3 times 5, that's 15, then 15 times 2 is 30. Or I could switch this up and say, okay, I can do 3 times 2 times 5. So 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 5 is 30. Or I could do it as 5 times 2 times 3. That's another way to do it. 5 times 2 is 10. 10 times 3 is 30. As long as I multiply everything together, it doesn't really matter the order, right? When we do multiplication, it's commutative, right? So the order is unimportant. So when I look at 8 times this negative 8p plus 5 times 8p plus 4, I could multiply 8 times this guy first, or I can multiply 8 times this guy first, or I can multiply these two guys together first. It really doesn't matter. So kind of the easiest way for me to do it, I just kind of go in order. So I would start out by just saying, okay, I have 8 times negative 8p, that's negative 64p. Then I have 8 times 5, that's 40, so plus 40. So now I have this guy times this guy. And now it's a problem that's pretty easy to deal with. So negative 64p would be multiplied by this guy. This is going to multiply by this guy. So negative 64p times 8p. What is negative 64 times 8? We know that's negative. And then 64 times 8 is 512. So negative 512. P times p is p squared. And then what is negative 64p times 4? Well, we know that's, again, negative. And then 64 times 4 is 256. So negative 256p. And then we have 40 times this guy. So 40 times 8p. 4 times 8 is 32. And then put a 0 at the end, that'd be 320. So plus 320, don't forget about the p. And then 40 times 4, that's easy. 4 times 4 is 16. Put a 0 at the end, it's 160. So now I can combine like terms here. So I could put negative 512p squared. Negative 256p plus 320p is 64p. So plus 64p and then plus 160. So there's my answer. Negative 512p squared plus 64p plus 160. Now, if you wanted to, I'm not going to do it in this video in the interest of time, you can multiply 8 times this polynomial here, 8p plus 4 first, then multiply that product by this guy. You're going to get the same answer either way. So the order is not important, again, when you're multiplying. And we know that from basic pre-algebra. All right, for the last problem, we have something that's going to be a little tedious. We have negative 5x minus 2 times negative 3x minus 6 times negative 2x minus 1. So again, if you're multiplying, the order isn't important. So I can go left to right. I can multiply these two together first and then multiply. It doesn't matter. So what I like to do is just multiply these two together first, get a product, and then take that and multiply it by this. So I'm going to start out by just finding the product of these two. So if I had that problem here, I would have negative 5x times this right here, this negative 3x minus 6. And then plus, I'd have negative 2 times negative 3x minus 6. Let's figure out what that is first. So negative 5x times negative 3x, that would be plus 15x squared. Negative 5x times negative 6, that would be plus 30x. Negative 2 times negative 3x would be plus 6x. Negative 2 times negative 6 would be plus 12. So essentially what I'm transforming this problem into is this guy right here. I'd have 15x squared. Combine like terms here. 30x plus 6x is plus 36x. And then plus 12 times this guy, this negative 2x minus 1. So an easy way to think about the step that we're at now, if I had 3 times 2 times 5, well, I would do these two first if I wanted to. 3 times 2 is 6. I'd have 6 times 5 now. That's exactly what I did here. I multiply these two together first, and now I have that product here times this kind of last one. So now I have this product here times this kind of last one here. So the end result is 30. And again, you can switch the order around if you want. It doesn't matter. You're going to end up with the same result. So now I got to take each term of this first polynomial, multiply by each term of the second polynomial. So I'm going to do 15x squared times this negative 2x minus 1. And then plus, I'm going to have 36x times this negative 2x minus 1. And then plus, I'm going to have 12 times this negative 2x minus 1. All right, so 15x squared times negative 2x That's going to give me negative 30x cubed. Then 15x squared times negative 1 is negative 15x squared. Then 36x times negative 2x is going to be negative 72x squared. Then 36x times negative 1 is going to be negative 36x. And then lastly, I have 12 times negative 2x, that's minus 24x. And then 12 times negative 1 is negative 12. So combine like terms here. I have negative 30x cubed. I have negative 15x squared and negative 72x squared. That's going to give me negative 87x squared. And then I have negative 36x minus 24x. That's going to be negative 60x. And then lastly, minus 12. So we end up with negative 30x cubed minus 87x squared minus 60x minus 12.